Hello to everyone around the world to this webcast, already the next webcast by the conference board. We're very excited to have you online. We have record attendance, so we've been more excited than usual. My name is John Metzler. I work for the conference board and I lead the Innovation and Digital Transformation Institute for the company. And we're doing these webcasts on a regular basis just to bring the best and the latest around innovation, competence, and capability to you. We're all about generating and supplying you with cutting edge insights. And that's exactly why we wanted to squeeze in this webcast, which was done on relatively short notice, but we think we got something exciting to tell you. These are crazy times, right? I think there's probably nobody who agrees so firmly on one thing today. We're living in crazy times, and change is constant. And change happens fast. So how do you manage that change? How do you manage through the crisis? And also how will you go and emerge out of the crisis as we go forward? And that's what we're going to go and look at and give you some tips from the best of the best in terms of leading companies who know how to do this best. How do I move the slide, Derek? Okay, cool. Housekeeping first, as always. Please ask questions. We want to make this as interactive as possible. We always want to have a conversation more than a presentation. So don't hold back. I'm going to weave those questions through the conversation. Maybe not immediately. I'll find the right spot. But rest assured, your questions are being noticed and are very, very welcome to make this the best event. You may download the presentation, it says here, but it's not only the presentation. We've also added the report of this study, as well as a little infographic that gives some top lines to that. So by all means, if you like what you're seeing, go and download, and this is complimentary to you. You can toggle full screen or smaller screen on the top right-hand corner. And if you like what you're going to see today, which we hope you do, then by all means, share it with your colleagues, share it around. And before you leave, also please provide us with your feedback. We're going to ask for some only 3 minutes feedback. We would really appreciate it if you can take that time to help us out, so we can improve into the future. We take your feedback very seriously. Another small piece, for some important, so let me not skip it. Earn credits. You can earn credits, but only if you stay online for the entire webcast. And the credit is available for participation in this live webcast only. We're having this, by the way, so that you know, this webcast, for maybe some colleagues of yours, is going to be available on demand in about 24 hours from now. But you can only get those credits if, like you, are attending this webcast live. And what you need to do is pay attention, which I'm sure you will, so that shouldn't be a problem. Type your full name, email address, and specify CP or CPD. And then click OK for those 3 pop-ups. So again, be attentive. It's an honor to go and introduce my guests today. The first is Victor Assad. He is CEO Strategic Human Resources Consulting. That is a whole mouthful, Victor. He is also, that's simpler, a managing partner of Innovation One. And he has been collaborating with the conference board to present the key findings of the research that has just come out. And we're very excited to have him be joined by Peter Coffey. I don't know where to start. Peter is quite an innovator and quite a talker, as I'm sure you're going to see and hear. He's also a member of this Innovation Digital Transformation Institute that I just mentioned, the advisory board of that. So we know Peter very well, and we are thrilled that he has been willing to take an hour out of his very busy schedule to go and provide his perspective from the front line and from a company as Salesforce.com, which I'm sure you know has been named the best, or at least very close to the best innovators in the world. So that should be very, very interesting. Thanks again for joining us, Peter. And with that, Victor, you want to take it away right now, right?
Well, thank you very much, John. I appreciate that introduction. And Peter, it's always a pleasure to be with you on a conference like this with the two of you. And very exciting to talk about reinventing innovation in times of crisis and the lessons that we have from leading companies. And, it was just in January, the conference board had conducted its CEO challenge, an annual survey of CEOs, and they asked them, what's the world going to look like in 2025? And one of the results that came back is that innovation will remain an essential priority then as it is today. And then COVID-19 hit, and innovation, the need for innovation has skyrocketed. And I know we've all seen a lot of the same headlines across Europe and the United States and Canada and the world for that matter. Innovation is critical. And why? Because the companies that are highly innovative, they have higher growth, higher profits, they have better stock market performance than less innovative companies. And for everybody, it's essential. And COVID-19 has really made that essential piece for survival hit home. And so we're very excited to talk about innovation. And John, please give us some of your observations about crises and innovation.
I don't want to go and take time away from you guests. I have some point of view which I'll weave into my comments. But for now, Peter, I mean, you're so close to this, right? Both within your company, but and I also know in the ecosystem
Absolutely.
of innovation that you're placed. So what are you seeing has happened in those crazy few months? I mean, when we just looked at it, it was only 3 months ago, 4 months. But of course, it's totally different. As VP Strategic
Well, John, you've been
Research,
kind enough
what do you see?
to mention Salesforce having been named on a number of lists as a sustained culture of innovation. And the dividend of that is that now customers have been inviting us into the room to have conversations about their own innovation processes and priorities, which is something that, 10 years ago, we were thought of as, a one-trick pony. Our innovation was cloud, and now people are realizing that the innovation engine has been generating a lot of things. The result of that is that in this current situation, people are asking us a lot of questions, and of course their questions are the meat of my research. The number one message that I'm trying to share with our customers, and this is something that Victor has already kind of pointed out, is that when things get difficult, innovation is not something that you defer until things have quieted down. Innovation has to be prioritized. You can find some really striking examples of companies that have lived that truth and done very well by doing so. In 1933, Procter & Gamble invented the format that we now call the soap opera. At the time, it was a radio program. And by the end of the Great Depression, they had many, many programs of which they were the sponsor, and their stockholders were saying, why are you investing all this money in this marketing when people have no money to spend? And the Procter & Gamble folks fortunately had the spine to tell the stockholders, be quiet and watch. And they came out of that depression with brand recognition and market share that sustained them into the times when things were good. And one of the messages that I share is a quote from David Brooks at the New York Times in an article in Atlantic Monthly when he said that there's a Pacific Island tribe that has an expression, my sibling from the same canoe. The people who were with you when you were in a difficult situation are in effect family. And of course, at Salesforce, we use a number of terms related to the idea of family, including the Hawaiian ohana, the idea that you don't show up to sell, you don't go away until the customer comes back to buy. You show up to help, and that outreach can take the form of profound innovations. John Chambers at Cisco during the more recent crisis in 08-09 said, when things are bad, this is when you look to your adjacent markets or you look to your opportunities within your own market, and innovation has many forms. Someone said a while ago that we tell people to think outside your box. Well, the edges of your box represent things people were doing before they needed you, or right after they needed you, or concurrently with you. And every one of those is an opportunity that you should be examining, whether you should innovate through development, acquisition, innovate through partnership, anything that extends the umbrella of your brand to be a broader solution to a customer's changing need. Recognize the opportunity and necessity. I had a conversation with 30 CIOs in Canada yesterday, and a dominant theme from them is that things they had been trying to gain traction for getting the resources and permission to do were now suddenly receiving the oxygen in the maneuvering room that they need, because now there is a recognition that business as usual is not going to cut it either during the next 6 months while we're, as I might say, going through the tunnel of the pandemic crisis, but also for the 6 years that follow. Because one of the most interesting questions to be asking right now is, what are the durable changes in market structure, competitive environment, customer preference? Just for an example, look at the way that automobiles are sold. Most of automobile marketing is designed to get you to come into the showroom, kick the tires, and take the test drive, because that's when the real selling can begin. Except that today, the idea of sitting in a car with a stranger for a 30-minute drive is no longer something that fills people with excitement. That's kind of like, how do I avoid doing that for the longest possible time? And so you've got an entire industry with decades of experience in a business and marketing model that now needs to be almost turned inside out and upside down to deal with this new reality of how are people going to want to buy cars, not to mention that they were already coming into 2020 with the question of, do people want to buy cars anymore? And so this genuine need for genuine innovation, not incremental improvement of existing processes, is a top of mind discussion at the most strategic levels of companies today. And so what was a multi-year notion of a digital transformation initiative has suddenly become a, what can we do in the next 2 or 3 months because it's necessary? What can you do with the moment of permission to change? And this is really key. In so many industries, there are legacy practices that nobody likes, but no one wants to be the first one to leave the party. Industries in which, for example, there are certain major international trade show events where everyone complains about the cost. No one really likes having to share attention with all the competitors in the room, but no one wanted to be the only one who didn't show up at that event that year. And now they all, in essence, have a free pass this year when the event is not happening at all, to say, well, okay, what can we do with an event that's our own brand, a digital engagement, a whole new model? Everyone now, in effect, has a 1-year recess from business as usual, and those who treat that as a time to just, be quiet and gather their resources will wonder what happened to them a year from now, when those who really did seize the moment and accelerated innovation, re-examined the need of their customer, were open to the possibility that decades-long practices now really are up for genuine transformation on a radically accelerated time frame. I would have a hard time coming up with any vertical industry in which I could not look them in the eye and say, this is an opportunity for you to do some of the most transformative thinking and some of the most transformative, change of your own behavior and change of your relationship to your market that you will ever enjoy in your entire career. And Victor, I know you have a tremendous amount of research to share on some much more granular and finely focused aspects of what that kind of innovation behavior can represent. And I'm really looking forward to having that shared with the group. So let me turn it back to you.
This is where, Victor, you gave me the opportunity before to talk. Let me say a few words now. One, I'm glad you brought up P&G, which was my previous life. And I just also heard that they are doing the same thing today. They keep their advertising spending through the crisis. So it's wonderful to see that there's at least some consistency in some things.
It worked before.
The second one is, I love exactly. The other thing is, I love what you just said around the edges of the box. There's a lot of talk about, what's the box that you're going to innovate in, right? And everybody really visualizes that there's a new box. Well, start from the edges around your own box.
Well, the other interesting thing about that metaphor, John, is that so many people do that innovation inside their own box, and then they discover that what they've done is turn themselves into a beautifully curated drop of oil in a world of water. If you don't extend your innovation energy beyond your own boundaries and bring your customers along with you, bring your supply chain along with you, if you don't invest in your supply chain partners, and it might seem kind of paradoxical, well, why would I invest money in other companies? Because if they can't fully participate in these high throughput, high efficiency processes, if they still want, a paper invoice, or in the oilfield services industry, we have people who say, well, I can't start anything until the rubber stamp has been put on the drawing and initialed to give me permission to begin the work. If you can't extend the envelope of your innovation beyond your own boundaries, then it can become almost irrelevant because you're the only one in the world who's speaking that language, and that's not a very useful thing to be.
Yeah, stretch your core, I always call that. And the last point that I resonated to was the word help. Indeed, flip your marketing to helping. I find that to be very interesting. And then also some of the things you mentioned is one key thing you mentioned is hurry up, do it now. So I'm sure everybody is awake, even those at the West Coast, by now. And let me now turn it over to Victor for the key learnings.
Well, thank you, John. And, Peter and I are on the West Coast and we're awake, and I'm sure there's others out there with us. And, picking up on what Peter said, a main learning from our recent survey on, looking for the emerging trends of innovation in the digital era is that high innovators treat innovation as an overall strategic imperative that permeates the whole organization. It's not just in the R&D organization. It is broad. And so the executives in these organizations, they very enthusiastically, they broadly share their strategic vision for innovation, how they want the company to be innovative, what's the direction of it. They share the strategies, they deploy goals, they broadly share what they're learning about the competition, new technology, what's emerging out there. Peter talked about, what's around the edges of the box. Sometimes we use an analogy, I'm from Minnesota, of melting snow. Snow melt at the edges first, but that snow, it's melting off your roof. It's actually beginning to melt much higher, but the melting at the edge shows you that something bigger is going on. They're always looking for that. Peter spoke very well about moving from strategic planning that is mostly about planning, whether it was a 6-quarter event or the longer 3 to 5 year planning events, to mostly doing. And particularly during times in crisis, as Peter said, as John said, it's about picking up and doing, moving quickly, gathering data, making fast-paced decisions, but don't resting on it. High innovators invest in innovation, and it's not just labs. It's investing in training for employees, sharing data, organizational learning, and they mostly take a long-term focus, even though, as Peter and John said, they're looking for what steps we can do tomorrow and the next day, but they keep a long-term focus. They nurture transparent, collaborative cultures and very agile organizations. A question we ask in the Innovation One Health Index is, can you change 50% of your operations in 2 years? And for a large company, think of how difficult that is. But the highly innovative companies have figured out that they need to be agile like that to make change, to be innovative. Peter talked about it very well. In addition to involving their employees, they involve their external partners and the supply chain, to be sure, but their customers, academics, thought leaders, incubators, but they all have a well-defined process to move innovation forward. It's not a mad scramble every day. There's a pretty well-defined process for it. They digitize with success, and that's going to be a big part of what we talk about, because a lot of digitization doesn't work so well. So we're going to talk about that. And they make fast, fact-based decisions. They measure their progress, and they adjust rapidly to commercialize innovation.
Before we move on too far, I just want to mention something that recently crossed my radar. Apparently this has been around for a long time, but I recently ran across the expression Conway's Law, which is that when an organization builds a process, it necessarily winds up to some degree mirroring its organization chart in the way it builds that process. Because processes have components, the components have to move information in and out and move them along. And it's going to wind up unavoidably looking like the organization chart of the company. Well, Conway's corollary is that since you probably won't get it right the first time, reinventing the process requires that you be open to the possibility of reinventing your organization. And the idea that you can do genuine innovation with an unchanging organizational structure is probably oxymoronic. It simply cannot happen. It's unrealistic to believe that that can happen. And a lot of companies try to innovate from inside the rut or from inside the foxhole, as I said before. And so being open to the possibility of reinventing your organization as an enabler for reinventing anything else you do is really important. The other thing is that you've mentioned fact-based decisions. Among your biggest enemies at this point is all those things you were taught in business school about take the data, relentlessly forecasting, look for, all these, I've done forecasting classes at the MBA level. And today, forecasting is a very dangerous thing to be doing. I use the model of the roulette wheel. If you walk up to a roulette table and put $100 each on red and black, 95% of the time your next spin will be red or black, and you'll even out your losses and redistribute your stake, and you've hedged your risk and you congratulate yourself. Well, if you do that 13 times, there's a 50% chance that a green slot, a 0 or double 0, will wipe you out completely. And if you didn't keep that extra $100 in your pocket to get back in the game, then you're screwed. You had a brilliant forecast, but you didn't think about scenarios. And today, what I think people are realizing is pandemic was one of the things that was a 0 or a 0-0 on the roulette wheel. You could look at it and see that it could happen, but the data didn't show it ever having happened in recent memory. And so too many people were caught with a very, very good forecast, but not a good collection of scenarios for which they had that extra $100 in the side pocket.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. And I tell you, my next trip to Las Vegas or Monaco, I'm
only in the
coming with
U.S.
you.
do we have 2 green slots. In other civilized countries, they only have the 1.
So, guys, with all of this wisdom already
time, aren't we?
spent in the first 21 minutes, we need to, Victor, you need to make sure that we go through the 5 key findings in 20 minutes. So we have a lot.
Very good
for Q&A.
All right. Well, this is the Innovation One Health Index, and to go through this quickly, as you can see, there's 13 points on this. This was developed by Dr. Brooke Dobney of Innovation One. He's the founder, and he has a PhD in business strategy. And what he quickly learned 25 years ago is that companies that were really good at business strategy weren't financially successful. And he looked for what was the missing link, and the missing link was innovation. And so he did empirical research. He's published over 20 academic articles, and he's found these 12 components of innovation. Some of them we've already talked about. Just quickly, executives have to share their vision and goals for innovation. They have to invite employees and external partners to connect with it. They have to work on their strategic infrastructure, which we've talked about. Not too much planning, being more action-oriented. They have to invest in the skills of their employees. They have to share learning broadly across organizations, what fails, what succeeds, not just the success. And they invest in the technology and financial support, and they also invest a lot in digitalization. In these areas here of knowledge generation, transfer, and decision making, certainly they give permission for people to ask questions, share ideas, but to build upon the ideas and to make decisions, as we've talked about, knowledge-based decisions quickly, not to do too much forecasting, to Peter's point. They get people engaged in the process, particularly teams, and they empower them to manage the innovative idea, staying within the strategic direction of the company. And then the biggest thing is alignment. They have to align their current operations to innovate that new thing, and that can be the graveyard of innovation. So this is how we start our surveys, and what we did find, and to John's point, is that there's 5 sub-themes that came out of this most recent survey that we did with the conference board. The first one, and we've talked about it quite a bit already, is strategic planning to strategic action. The highly innovative companies really have learned to move quickly to action. And so they look at, what do our analytics reveal? What are we seeing now? They're looking for, the melting of the snow around the edges, or the things around the edge of the box. They're looking for those early signs of disruption and what can be done today, this quarter, next quarter, and next year. And while they do that, while they're looking for what's new, they still look at a long-term focus for that. The second thing is high innovators develop these very transparent, collaborative, and agile cultures. And again, they're marked by well-defined processes to move ideas forwards, by investment in employees and organizational learning. And managers, leadership is critical here. We'll go through this in detail in just a moment. But managers invite their teams to innovate, individuals to innovate, and to build upon each other's ideas. These organizations also have talent systems and performance management systems that support innovation with who they bring into the company, and their performance management rewards innovation. They reward failing fast, furiously, and frequently. What did we learn today? What is tomorrow's experiment? And moving forward. They measure innovation and they shield innovation from organizational disruption. This survey had some new questions that we can get into.
And Victor, one of the
really
questions we've had
illustrate
come
that.
in is, well, what is a culture of innovation? And you just hit one key word. When people hear the phrase fail faster, they sometimes think that's a Silicon Valley thing. In real organizations, no one gets rewarded for failure. But someone at our Dreamforce conference a few years ago said, reframe it. It's not that we're getting good at failing. It's that we're developing a culture that learns by experimentation. I contrast it with, organizations that do pyramid building. By the time you've built 10% of a pyramid, it's really hard to change your mind and go to a cube. You need to build a culture in which things are expected to be not right the first time, which is not the same thing as seeking failure. It's seeking experimentation. I think it was Thomas Edison who was famous for having said, we're making excellent progress. We found 1,000 things that don't work, and none of our competition is anywhere near that far.
I call it
That's
a love
good
of
too.
learning culture.
Yep.
Is what you need to create. And by the way, it's interesting because Microsoft has embraced that as well. They went from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. And when you think of that and you look at the results of Microsoft, you go, hey, something is working. So thanks for the question, Adam. Move on.
Yeah, those are good examples. Well, in the survey, we learned from this question, it confirmed for us some things we knew and strengthened our learning, and that is the importance of cultures of innovation and these cultures that we've talked about, learning, experimentation, and the importance of digitization that works and measures are essential. So you look at these, there's like 9 questions here. They're on a 10 to 1 point scale, and they look at things like, by the way, the blue dots are the high innovators, and the yellow or orange dots on your screen are the low innovators. So they're both using engineering or applied science to be innovative. You'll see the high innovators lead in all of these. They're pursuing opportunities to redesign that experience for their customer. They're seizing opportunities for environmental and social sustainability. But look at here, big gap on developing a strong culture of innovation. That's where the high innovators shine. It's like with the low innovators, they may depend on a technology they've invested in to be their one shot, to be innovative, or they're doing design thinking, but they don't have the supportive culture for innovation and making change and moving forward and sharing data that's so essential. Also with digitization. The gap here isn't quite as big between the high and low innovators, but there's a pretty big gap here. And the high innovators have learned not only to use digitization, big data analysis, and so on, they use it successfully. This is about expanding. Go ahead, John.
No, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I thought you were done.
This is also about, involving your external partners. And then the last one here I'll call attention to is measures and metrics. You'll see even with the high innovators, they're perhaps not, they're not using measures successfully as much as some of these other things. But for those who do, they get a huge gap over the low innovators. So, measures are important.
Yep. So Nancy Dawes asked a question, what are these measures? We're going to go over metrics. So we're going to look at them at the end of the presentation, Nancy. So hold your horse for
Victor, one of the great examples of a company that had a culture of innovation and arguably allowed themselves to drift into a culture of incremental improvement would be, and I'm meaning no disrespect, it's a wonderful company, but Sony, which was early to the party in areas like bringing in transistors and other key new technology, but in one study was shown to have invested at least 2 cycles of incremental improvement in the Trinitron picture tube, which is an amazing innovation when it was new, but they continued to try to improve it when really it was clear the time had come to move beyond the cathode ray tube into flat panel displays. And it's one of the few really precisely quantified studies where you can say, this is what happens when you allow yourselves to be trapped into relentless, concentrated, focused improvement of your core technology that you think is your innovation, but it has in fact become your legacy, stealthily and in the night, as it were, it turned into your legacy. And being able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, wait a minute, that's not innovative behavior anymore, is a difficult and skill. And it's a leadership challenge more than it is a technical one.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, I love what you said before, Victor, which was it's not about design thinking. Many companies do design thinking and they show hackathons and thousands of post-its on the wall and go like, hey, we're doing innovation. We have an innovation culture. Culture is about the humans, right? The culture is about beliefs, values, behaviors, how they live in the company, and how you create as a leader a fertile ground for the innovators.
And you can pull yourself. You're going to be using the mechanisms of innovative behavior to do what, in fact, is really just incremental improvement of your core, and you're not, in fact, innovating, even though you're doing the dance. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Very true.
One.
Just quickly here, many of us will say digitization, artificial intelligence, big data analysis, blockchain, critically important for our future, invest in it. But yet 70 to 83% of digitization projects fail. And we're going to explore why they fail, because I think that's critical to understand. With this chart, and again, this is all in support of cultures of innovation, we were looking at how managers encourage innovation at the team level, but also what organizations do to change their talent management systems and what they do to shield their innovation projects from organization disruptors. And these are essential. So in these questions, these 6 questions here, you'll see with the first 3, the high innovators in blue here lead. Their manager encourages innovation, not a big gap there between the high and low innovators. But when you look at the talent strategies, these high innovators, they're very good at understanding they need to bring in people that have different skills and think differently. They have diversity of thought than the rest of the organization, particularly tied to their innovation strategies and goals. And then they encourage these people to be innovative, their managers do when they're on the teams. And then they change their performance management systems. So they reward things like speaking up, giving ideas, collaborating, not hoarding your expertise, but sharing it. And they also have learned that their performance management system should be there as a way to kind of measure, see how we're doing, making improvements, not there to control the work of teams. They're very empowering to teams, but keeping teams aligned to the strategy and moving forward. And you look over here on this side where we ask questions about pressures on the job day to day. We asked about, do you take a short-term or long-term focus? We ask about, are innovation activities disrupted by changes to leadership or executive sponsorship? The first thing we see is all of a sudden the low innovators lead, and that's not a good thing. They lead because their employees feel more than the high innovators the pressure of day-to-day work. And that's because the culture is less supportive of moving forward in the activity that comes with innovation. They tend to be too short-term focused and not looking at a long-term strategy. And while you got to move fast in a crisis, it's important overall to have that long-term strategy and to move forward towards it. And then also here, innovation is easily disrupted with the low innovators. A change in team leadership, a change in sponsorship, it's easily disrupted, where in the high innovators, the culture supports innovation and moving forward, even when you get a new leader or a new sponsor. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see this because I'm getting that a lot in my executive education courses and classes. Everybody is too busy being busy. And so where do I find the time to innovate? Those comments, they always baffle me. So you're spot on right by showing this. Maybe a good way to end this part on culture, and then we'll move on to the other ones, is a comment by Disha Thakur, who says, the culture change is also very difficult to execute, absolutely. And the speed of change is usually slow. It takes time. Interesting to see that it's what really separates the low and high innovators. The other scores are much closer to one another, while culture is the biggest differentiator. And that is so true. And the reason is, culture is the soft stuff is the hard part. Leaders find it so hard to go and wrap their arms around these more, these softer areas, but it is absolutely pivotal in today's climate.
is pivotal. And, particularly purpose-driven cultures are very good at this. And when your personal goals align with the purpose for humanity of your company, that's golden as far as people not feeling pressure to be innovative.
Well, two questions I want to give credit to. I asked for people's questions, so I do want to go and comment. Jeffrey Stelman, sorry, very insightful. Is there a bottom-up dimension to an innovation culture? We don't have time to go into that right now, but I'm telling you the answer is no. Well, there's an element to it, but the tone needs to be set by the leadership. And I need to stop it there. And then Ricardo Ampudia says, culture has been and always will be very difficult to change. True, but it is changeable. So these comments I wanted to go and give credit to. Thank you.
Yeah,
now,
it is changeable. And to what you said, it takes courageous leaders at the top to do it. They have to give permission and set the example.
And in fact, in the first time that Salesforce was named World's Most Innovative Company, the people at Forbes did a backstory, and they found a single decision that was made that the company was starting to drift into the vein of becoming a traditional software company, and the conscious adoption of agile processes was controversial, had to be driven from the top down, but produced measurable benefits and very quickly became the way everything is done. So yeah, it can be done. There are existence proofs of top-down driven, conscious, intentional culture change, and it's rare.
Yeah.
Okay, come on.
Well, these are the 6 items when we asked, about 13 different methods and technologies of the survey participants. These are the top ones for driving innovation in the high innovators. And they include some things that have been around for a while, good, R&D and experimental design and so on, prototyping. Again, we've talked about strong innovation cultures, agile methodologies, the agile manifesto and software, but now that's moving well beyond software to other industries and to organizations like human resources and so on. Very helpful to innovation, design thinking, involving external experts, your customers, prototyping real quick, and then moving into your more standard ways of developing new products, which leads to the next one on the list, stage gate methodologies. This seems to be, it's really essential for highly regulated organizations in pharmaceutical, biotech, medical devices. We're hearing these days about big pharma and small biotech firms looking for cures for COVID-19. Stage gate methodologies that they're moving rapidly through are critically important, and big data analytics. Big data analytics, we looked at artificial intelligence, blockchain. Big data analytics on that list scores the highest, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. This chart here shows all of the different methodologies or technologies that we asked our questions about. In this first area here, it's, how often are you using this? And the second area is success. And actually the chart is set up on how often they use it, but we're really focused on which one of these are the most successful, and that is the one on the right. And so, and you'll see, artificial intelligence is second from the bottom here, which I believe, I use it in my HR consulting practice. Very important for the future, but again, it doesn't always work. Companies are struggling with it, and we'll be exploring that in just a moment. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
Well, we'll get into some of the details on AI. As a broad brush, it can be very dangerous because applying a machine learning perspective will make you very, very good at what you've seen before, as opposed to an evolutionary design generation perspective. So, and all these things unfortunately fall under this one very broad umbrella of AI. People think they're, quote, using AI, unquote, and yet it can be directed in quite different directions.
Well said. Excuse me there, we rocketed ahead here. So studies have looked at why does digitization fail, or the implementation of artificial intelligence or other, digital technology fail. Number one, culture kills it. So if it's a culture that is closed and say, well, this is not how we do things, we want to protect what we've done, that's going to kill any change. And certainly, the investment that you make in using big data analysis software and artificial intelligence, blockchain, what have you. There's other reasons for that. poor data management plans, artificial intelligence, digitization, these IT systems, how they fit together, what you do with the data, how you make it available. Could be, another big reason is simply poor project management and poor change management and holistic change management to make these changes. When you put in place big data analysis, or particularly artificial intelligence, you're going to change the workflow for the employees. And if you don't involve them in that change, even if it means that the change is going to change or eliminate their job, it's going to go badly. Research has shown that when companies involve employees in these changes, it goes better, particularly when they're transparent about what the end game is, what the end effect is, and treat people well in the process. Another reason for failure is failure to achieve scale. They may have had a great project, but they couldn't take that project and expand it across the whole company where it would be applicable. And on this chart, I give some resources of studies that have looked at this. Again, gentlemen, I invite your comments here.
The battle I've been fighting for several years now is to prevent people from thinking that digital transformation means adopting technology. If you digitize your silos, you will get very, very good silos, but they will still be silos. You will not be achieving the collaboration you need. John Boyd teaches fighter pilots how not to get killed, and he talks about the OODA loop, OODA, observe, orient, decide, act, and treating your IT, your digitized investments as tools for observation and orientation, as opposed to just automating your existing practices is key. I sometimes point out to people that when IBM was first founded, it was called the Computing, Tabulating, Recording Company. And a lot of companies are just investing in getting better and better and better at computing, tabulating, and recording. They're not getting better at collaboration, engagement, and insight. And understanding the purpose of your digitization and not just the figures of merit like speed and capacity is really, really key. Or otherwise you will have a massive investment in digital transformation, you think, that does not in fact transform, but merely accelerates your old behaviors.
Yeah, I always say digital transformation is more about transformation than about digital.
Indeed.
By the way, for those listening, if you're interested in this field, we are about to publish a report where we're looking at some digital transformation lessons from, again, some of the best companies in the US and Europe. It's coming out in the next two months. We'll announce it through a webcast as well. So watch this space. Let's take 3 minutes each for the next, for the last two, Victor.
Will do. This one is involving external partners, and you can't do it alone. That's the takeaway here. So it's very important to involve your supply chain, as Peter talked about earlier, your customers, incubators that are out there, different universities or thought leaders. And if you look at the triangle on the left, let's assume that is your company. So as Peter talked about, all companies have hierarchy. They have boundaries, and good things can come out of hierarchy. It sets the strategic direction, it deploys goals, it empowers, it gives off signing authority, budget, but work gets done in teams, and not just teams, but teams of teams. And so the highly innovative companies have figured out how their teams and teams of teams get connected with other teams of teams, including those outside of their organization, which is these other three triangles. And so you may start, talking to someone in the triangle next to you, and lo and behold, that individual or that team of teams knows that there is a solution 2 companies over that you didn't have any idea about despite Googling it. And so it's very important to have these external networks and to use them. In our data, external ecosystems or open innovation is where we measured that. And you can see it's kind of a close second here to these top 6. But having external partners is very critical. The other thing is measurement. And again, we've had a question earlier, John, about measurement. And this is the Signposts of Innovation. And so this data was published, I believe, in 2017 by the Conference Board. And the Conference Board wanted to provide its members a framework for measurements for innovation. A lot of companies were measuring their innovation projects. Are they on budget? Are they on time? Are they hitting technical hurdles? But this gives a little bit of a broader framework for measures. And just quickly, it's certainly around research and development and applying prototyping, experimental design, good practice for that. Digitization, which we've already begun to talk about. Looking for opportunities to be innovative in the world of environmental and social sustainability. And the business opportunities for that, and how really that improves your brand, particularly with younger workers. Being critically focused on your brand to your customers and your investors and that customer experience, getting that feedback from them. Your customers will be very good at telling you what hurts, maybe what they don't like, but you need to create with them. They won't always have the solution about what they truly need. And then, of course, culture, which we've been talking about, and then most recently,
Victor, what I've always loved about these signposts is that circle at the center of business and financial outcomes. At Bumblebee Foods, as in the tuna company, they have a rule that no project can be named for the technology that it acquires or deploys. You can't have a project called ERP upgrade, for example. It has to be named something like supply chain acceleration or customer engagement increase. And if you always know why you're doing it as opposed to getting focused on the what, I believe that you wind up having an innovation approach as opposed to an incremental improvement approach. The other great thing about the signposts is that you can start to say to people, okay, you say we're working on getting innovative. Which one or more of these buckets do you feel we're really investing in here? Because otherwise, become innovative is about as useful as get rich or lose weight. It describes a goal end state, but it does not tell you what you're going to do tomorrow that's different from what you did yesterday. That's why I find this framework has been tremendously useful in discussing our own offerings to our customers and say, if your innovation strategy looks like this, here are some things we think we can help you do. But I think it's just a great self-assessment tool for an organization.
Yeah, well said. I liked what you said about the focus on the outcomes and naming the project on what you want to occur. Yeah, that is terrific.
I just wanted to reinforce, Peter, what you just said around the predictive nature of these metrics. I mean, this is really why we started this, because most of the metrics around innovation output are related to what happens after the facts. Usually that is 1 or 2 years after you introduce an innovation in the marketplace. Starting to act upon your results then, obviously that gives you a lag time, which is way too long in today's world. And this allows you to look at your operations, your different elements. And I always like to look at this slide vertically. So this is the core of what you do with innovation. You got your research and development, and of course it needs to all be fed by your customer experience, and then also you need to think about how you brand it back to the customer, right? So that's one axis. The second axis is to the left, where you have your internal culture, your innovation culture, as we have extensively talked, and you have your, which is relatively new, your external innovation ecosystem. And then on the right, you got your new forces coming in. Digitization, as we just talked, is a new force. And of course, environmental and social sustainability.
I think it's really interesting to see what happens when you put priority over the last sustainability in there as part of your innovation framework.
So
when I was at Exxon Chemical in Baton Rouge, we were going through the first era of oil embargo, and in the process of looking at the way energy flowed around the plant, we installed additional insulation in many places that hugely improved the metric of energy cost per pound of product produced. And those changes, once made, paid off forever. They forever on. That plant was going to be more efficient. You took a momentary crisis of that Arab oil embargo and turned it into a ratchet that you could turn that permanently increased the measure of performance. And that's such an interesting opportunity to look at the new concerns and say, wait a minute, these aren't obstacles to overcome. These are triggers to drive us forward in ways that will have long-term payoffs. Yes.
Yep, that long-term
Well, and
focus.
that combines your earlier point on agility and looking for opportunities. What can you do today? With indeed that increased priority around environmental and social sustainability, which, by the way, what I hear from I lead the European Innovation Council for the Commerce Board as well, and Vita Shore, my partner in crime, is doing that for the US. And what we sense is a big difference in terms of how much focus European companies are putting in this area versus American companies, with obviously exceptions, but by and large, that we see European companies have already done what you described earlier on, which is embed that very firmly into their innovation priorities and programs.
Hmm.
Okay, I guess we're moving to the last slide.
Yep, and this is just a reminder about measures. When companies put in measures, they do very well. So we saw that slide earlier. That's just a quick reminder. And, to conclude here, innovation in times of crisis, you have to treat innovation as a strategic imperative, enthusiastically talk about that strategic direction, deploy goals. You got to turn planning into action, be very agile. Don't let your hierarchy and structure get in the way. Nurture these open and collaborative cultures. Successfully involve different methodologies, technologies, but learn how to learn digitization, how to do it successfully, and look out for how, as Peter talked about, how some of these technologies may get you in a frame that you can't break, or you may in effect be sort of very sophisticatedly driving forward, but looking in the rearview mirror.
Okay. Well, one of the things I'll just mention,
Involve
someone said, well,
external
how do you measure your
partners and
innovation?
measure
And,
what you do
3M, which of
best you
course has
can.
been a
Make
great partner for
fact-based
our
decisions,
work
but you
here,
got to do
hosted
it
one of
rapidly.
our wonderful innovation master
Nice
classes,
overview, Victor.
is
Thank
a
you.
company with a
Peter,
well-earned
anything to add to
reputation
this
for
slide? I have
innovation.
an
And
excellent
in some
question which I
cases,
wanted
just
to
a
throw
very
at you.
simple number. I'm afraid I
Please.
can't find the precise figure, but the fraction of their revenues that comes from products introduced in the past 3 years, I believe, is one of their measures. And I think you need to develop measures that are going to make you uncomfortable. You need to develop measures that don't have confirmation bias and that let you congratulate yourself for having done what you've always done better and better and better, which is the path to relentless incremental improvement. And of course, some of us, of people my age, were imprinted in business school with Japanese Kaizen culture. They were going to win with this relentless incremental improvement, and it turned out that not so much. It turned out, that Sony could have been Apple, but Apple turned out to be Apple. It's interesting to look at what happened when, the iPod was introduced. It was considered overpriced and underfeatured, but 3 years later, there was a new word, literally a new word in the dictionary, podcast. They weren't calling them podcasts before there were iPods. They took an activity of downloading stuff off the internet and crafted an experience around it, and then condensed that experience into a product plus a service, namely iTunes. And that was genuine innovation. It looked at what Steve Jobs said he wanted to give his daughter, all of her favorite songs in her pocket, an outcome. And then it crafted a solution that did not fall into the mold of the MP3 player marketplace, because there was a product category, but they transcended that category by meeting the need. And innovation looks like that when it's done that well.
It's interesting, as a last comment on Sony, it's a bit related to the point on agility earlier on, is the CEO apparently of Sony said, at least I saw the quote somewhere, that we're too big to fail. Sony's going to be there, and Sony's going to continue. And of course, now we've learned that scale is a liability more than a benefit, right, in this climate. Back to the organizational, challenges that you highlighted before. Okay, I want to go and as I said, I have a nice question. Thank you, Andre. Sorry, this is very small print. Could an organization be highly innovative without being also inventive? What place, priority, role does in-house invention play within the best innovative companies? Always a sexy question. You guys, any perspective?
Well, I think about invention as, really creating something very new. Could be the electricity, the light bulb, the airplane. Innovation is anything new that drives value for an organization. And so we talked about the iPod. As I recall, Steve Jobs wasn't using any really new technology there. He just brought things together and learned, how to market it very well and provide a new experience around it and have it fit in the back pocket of jeans or the front pocket of jeans. So, I look upon them as different things. And in times of crisis, I think the innovation uh, goal is pretty critical. And you may find when you apply information that you didn't think about earlier, or new ways of doing things, can truly drive innovation and provide a new business model or a new way of doing things that's much more than incremental. Peter, any thoughts on that? His
Peter's
broadcast
frozen.
may have froze up there. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Thank you for the perspective, Victor. We have a few more questions, so I want to go and move on. Peter's answering. Anyway, anyway, we see that he's frozen. Hopefully he comes back for the last 3 minutes. Another question. Hubert de Brake, talking about measures. Can you please give a few examples? We're short in time, Hubert, but there is a report exactly on this that we have published already a couple of years ago, and I'll be getting that to you. If anybody wants a copy of the report, please put your name in the chat for the report. And we're happy to go and send you the Signposts of Innovation publications. Another one I do want to take is, let me see, this goes quick. This is a good one. This is back to you, Victor. Which of these 6 points would you single out as the most important one in times of crisis? Because all of these seem to be relevant at any time, right? Which one would you go and say, this is the one that really, really needs to change today?
Turn planning into action and be agile. Go, go, go. Move, move, move. And, we talked about the learning culture, moving quickly. Don't sit on your hands. Move.
Yeah, I would also, obviously, I think they're all important. So, yes, that's true. They are important at any time. But they just are more important today. And you have, the pace of change is shrinking even further. I always say that we're living in the VUCA world, right? That's how I start my classes. VUCA, most of you will know, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That was in January. Now we're living, and there's a huge black swan that has come into our world, and we're living on VUCA on steroids, as I call it. So that means that we need to go and step up how we have done our work in January to even more agile, even faster, even shorter notice, shorter time span efforts. Any last comments, Victor? We don't have any more questions at this point. I'll let you close.
Well, thank you very much. This is truly a crisis, and it's a worldwide crisis. But there is a lot of opportunity for companies to be innovative. Following these principles that we've talked about. Whether it's a bourbon maker that's making hand sanitizer, or companies that are making face shields that never made them before, and of course everything that's going on in the biotech world, pharma world, on looking for vaccines and cures for COVID-19. So, crisis is the mother of invention and innovation. And so I encourage everyone listening to put these principles to work and be innovative.
Yep, I think definitely we're seeing a lot of nice examples of that to pop up where the creativity is showing very prominently. I would also say that as we emerge of the crisis, everybody says the world's not going to be the same. The world is not going to be the same, and so it sounds like an obvious one, but it is going to be the reality. So hopefully you have found some of these handles, tools, insights helpful. Please, as Derek put up here, please give us your experience and your feedback with your thoughts. If you want the reports on the Signposts, again, reach out. I'm happy to share. You can also find them on the website, by the way. They are also complimentary. But I'm happy to go and help you find them and get them over to you. with that, Victor, thank you so much for the obviously collaboration with the Conference Board. I think this showed again a very successful and insightful report and insights. And I wish everybody a great rest of the evening, night, day, and good luck. Stay safe and